Welcome back to MPLI Recall. My name is Leo, your host. Let's call back in our guests, of course. We Bear Bros coming at you, and our special guest, MPLMY's Season 8 best caster we have here, Gideon Q. My guy, it's time for us to talk about your region, your country, your MPL representatives. Malaysia Bole. This is the actual hashtag for your M3 reps. What does that mean? What does Malaysia Bole mean?
So Bole basically in direct translation means can. So Malaysia can. And I think, this is a very suitable, putting it into context with where Malaysia is at compared to the rest of Southeast Asia, especially in the competitive MLBB scene. We've never been number one, not even close to number two. We're definitely like a 3 to 4, sometimes a 5 to 6. Most of the time, we don't make it too high. So Malaysia Bole coming in from as a very underdog perspective, looking to try to get as high as possible, maybe win it all. We'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I think the first thing that we have to talk about when we're thinking of Malaysia Bole, we got to start with our two teams here. First representative, Toda.
Todak was at MPLI. We saw them play, right? We talked earlier about how they're very different. We talked about a lone player, and it's this guy in the back. It's Lexia from RSGMY, right? Can you explain exactly what happened there? What's with the loaning of players?
Okay, so the loading of players, essentially what it is that you nab a player from another team, bring him over for a particular competition or a season, depending on what is basically the offer that's going to be. Say, hey, we'll pay you guys a bit. You let us borrow your player. That player gets a bit of a cut. He comes over to our team, maybe wins us a title, maybe doesn't win us a title. And, you kind of live life like that. And I think in this particular situation, people need to understand that Todak, they needed to loan Lexia because Chiku didn't exactly want to play the jungle role, but instead wanted to play the gold lane role that the meta is now shifting towards a marksman side laner. That's the general gist of it, right? They wanted Lexia to be the dedicated jungler. They also had Ajik, which is very new to the Todak team as well. They've been training him up throughout the season, but he's had some on and off performances. It's all based on how much experience he gains and whether he can kind of steadfast his own resolve. So he has the confidence because he is a very talented young player, but that's the issue. He's super, super young. He still gets the nerves. He still gets a little stage fright. Not as bad as compared to some of the other team members like Moy, who's also new, but generally the tank and support for the team. And I think that's where the biggest issue comes from when we're talking about Todak, right? Who is the support player? What kind of a support player do you need? If it's an enchanter type support, Moy usually should be able to have a good time, but he's a playmaker. He likes to go things on Cho. He likes to be able to go above and beyond. If he can, give him an Atlas, give him a Boxer, he might be able to make something happen with his team. But as you guys saw in MPLI's performance, Todak really did struggle because they're willing to try anything. And I think that's the scariest part here. They're willing to, even if people are going to say it's bad, they'll give it a shot until they can fully say we've explored all the options. We don't like this. This doesn't fit our style. We'll try something else. That's the Todak that we all know and love here in Malaysia.
Well, Todak did go back-to-back games support Cho. Like Moon played the Cho, and he played it very well. So at least for sure that's one part that's changing. But I have one question: is Lakesha gonna be at M3? I think we already revealed M3 lineups, and he's not part of that lineup. So I guess they're going back to Chico in the jungle, right?
Well, that's what we're all hoping and assuming that's the situation here. I think it's I'm not exactly sure why they're not bringing Lexia over for M3, or maybe they've kind of realized that maybe having too many shot callers is a little too hectic for the team and communications can be a little muffled, or maybe there just isn't enough time to really get Lexia up to speed with the chemistry that the rest of the team has. That's just a couple of speculations I have, but it's really hard to put a finger on it.
Okay, we'll find out when you get there. All right, real quick before we move on to the next Malaysian team, Naisu, I have a question for you, man. Todak with the shuffling of the roles and the heroes, is this good or bad thing? Just as an outsider, like we really didn't get to see much of it intermingle with our metagame, but in your perspective, what do you think?
Well, like Gideon said, it, the fact that they're willing to try things is good. But is it the right time to try things? To be honest, for MPLI, that was probably the right time to try things going into, a bigger tournament such as M3. But, the shuffling around and everything is, to be honest, in our current day and age of metagame and everything, I think it's the right call. The hard part in being that flexible or versatile or whatever you want to look at it as is finding the proper execution for things. And, with a mix of experience, with a mix of age, and just the different mindsets that come into a team when you're talking about shuffling, especially roles and players, it's very hard to just execute things on the go. It takes time, right? Like we all know that from just playing ourselves, like being players ourselves within the game of Mobile Legends. Like we know that we can't just make a change and then be great at it, right? You're talking about these teams shuffling things around and needing it to be great to a professional standpoint, a professional level. So I think that's very hard to do. Although I do want to say that flexibility, adaptability, very important. It's just you have to figure out how are you going to execute it to pull it off properly. So I think that's the other thing that they have to handle.
All right. Looking forward to how maybe they can continue with the shuffle because, well, that went deep, M2. So I'm wondering how far they can go M3. Let's put a spotlight on the Malaysian champions now. MPL S8 for Malaysia. Again, we haven't seen this in a while, but they swept. Team SMG swept Todak, and it's this lineup here that was at MPLI. Again, no Sasa. So, Gideon, there's only really one way to look at this. Tell us exactly how different this lineup was compared to when it was them in the regular season or even the playoffs. How different is MPLI Team SMG to MPL MY SMG?
Pretty huge difference because I think what most people need to understand is that Sasa gives this level of confidence, this level of reliability that not a lot of players in Malaysia can really give to you, you know? And I think Sasa coming into Malaysia specifically helps the team have something to like put all their focus. Like, even if we are playing at our worst, Sasa is going to help maintain a certain level, a certain standard each and every time. That's why when you're seeing Sasa in particular during the regular season, he's not exactly like, oh, shaking his hands or like freaking out, big reactions. He's just like, you can clearly see on his face, my team is a little frustrating. We didn't play the cleanest game. We could have done better. We need to do better, and that's a level of pride and just a championship mindset that it's very difficult to have, especially for Malaysians, because things are very fleeting for us. You win once doesn't necessarily mean you'll win a second time. You get good now doesn't mean you'll be good in the next couple of months or so. So Sasa brings a level of consistency that a lot of his team members rely on to be like, hey, at the end of the day, we can trust on our players. We can especially trust this guy to keep us in check. If we make a mistake, he makes sure that we maintain that standard throughout. And I think for Team SMG to lose Sasa, and especially during the time of MPLI, is good and bad. Good in a sense where it's like, okay, now we need to start focusing on ourselves. We need to be that player. We need to put ourselves in Sasa's shoes and be a consistent player to really show off to everybody else that we are capable of doing it. What sucks about it is the fact is they're just not used to it. They're not used to having somebody, they don't have that level of experience where they are just sharp on the calls every single time. And I think that's what Sasa really brings to the team. Just that level of consistency, which everybody is just scrambling around. And it's hard to have it in your head, even after so many games. It's muscle memory to him, but it's still a learning process for the rest of the team members.
So, again, it's like you took such a huge part of Team SMG. So it's a very different SMG, just as a reference. So guys, the SMG that we saw at MPLI, we're going to be very different from the SMG at M3. So again, keeping your cards close to your chest. I like it. Renmar, how much do you think they'll change? Did you have, I'm sure you've done your research. You've been doing so much research over the past few weeks leading up to M3. Team SMG, how do you think they're going to rebuild? How how do you think Sasa is gonna change the game for SMG at M3?
Well, it was really telling for Team SMG that without Sasa on the table, they have difficulty, and better that it happened then than it does happen later at M3, meaning that the other members of Team SMG really have to step up. Thanks for zooming into the tiny gargoyle, Renmar. Thank you for that. When it comes to the World Championships, it's a whole team effort. And if ever something happens, or maybe for one game you really feel like one strategy another player has to come in because maybe they bring something to the table that the other one can't, they have to be ready. And I think that's the main point of improvement here for Team SMG. How are we going to fare without Sasa? If there'll be a game where for some reason Sasa just seems it might be better Sasa's sitting out and then someone else hit, then how will they prepare? And then at the same time, how will Sasa not being in the game affect the outcome of the game? What is he going to tell his co-players? What kind of info can he give? It becomes less of a Sasa-focused team and more of a well-rounded Team SMG that you can swap your pieces out and then they'll still be able to make it work. That's how I see them improving for M3.
Okay, last question before we wrap up about Malaysia. Gideon, Renmar mentioned something about swapping out. Does Team SMG have that in the bag? Do they have the capability to just swap things around? I mean, say for Sasa, I think Sasa stays. But how about the other moving pieces? Is that one of their main strengths?
I don't think that's one of their main strengths. I don't think swapping their pieces is generally good for them. I think what it boils down to is just whether or not the players are going to be comfortable that day, more so playing confidently, because I think the two main staples for Team SMG right now is Sasa and Zyme Senpoi. I think Zyme Senpoi has only this year was able to help Team SMG win. For the longest time, Team SMG has had this big curse and was a very big meme in the community as the 8th place team because they would just do well enough to pass the test, but not bad enough to get relegated each and every season until this season, which they've put a lot of investment into the team. And Zyme Senpoi really stood up as a veteran to kind of not only lead the team, but to make sure that they are consistent. He's extremely vocal, even when he is dead, and he can't really do anything, but he can help out his teammates. I think that if they wanted to switch things up, no, I don't think that's very possible for them. It's a little too late now for them to do that. In terms of can they brush up on their own individual individual plays, absolutely, because right now I think just having a cohesive plan when you get into a game is more important than being able to execute upon it, because execution is something that each individual player can work on themselves. Working as a team, I think that's a lot harder to achieve.
So it's more the evolution. So instead of switching pieces around, maybe they should evolve. As Remar mentioned, it'll come through an evolution. And again, we don't know what Sasa Team SMG is like when it butts heads against other metas. So again, it's very mysterious. Honestly, Team SMG, they have that going for them. It's a sense of mystery. Even I'm excited. Like what's SMG gonna look like on the world stage?